Dear Biker, this is a really odd story of how I came to see a literal dogman last night around midnight. I live in a neighborhood, by the way, near Newport, Oregon. But we're on the edge of a large forest behind our house, so not completely rural. Funny part of the story, so I had set up a live trap for a mouse last night. Catch and release, I can't stand to harm the creatures. It triggered at around midnight, and the loud pop of the door woke me up. I decided that I didn't want to just leave it in the cage all night long, waiting for morning. I could hear him trying to chew through the wires, and I didn't want him to torture himself or get hurt attempting to escape. So I decided I'd just take him outside immediately. Now, instead of releasing mice in the yard by my house, I always go about 3 miles away into a forested area. I'm not cruel enough to just release him by someone else's house, thus causing them to have a mouse infestation. Anyway, before I even got in my car to transport the little guy, my stomach began hurting like never before. It was a horrible, foreboding feeling that was almost telling me that something terrible was about to happen. There wasn't any reason for my stomach to just start screaming in pain. I essentially never have stomach problems. It's exceedingly rare at the least. I just don't get stomach aches. But this was painful on a scale that was so strange. I just kept getting this deep sense of something being terribly wrong. I got into the car with the little cage, going down the street. It was literally only 1 block away from my home, that I instantly slowed on the brakes because something enormous was at the side of the road. At first, I thought it was the biggest dog I've ever seen. Its silhouette was blacker than the night. As I slowed my car from maybe 20 to 10 miles per hour, it suddenly came out into the street light and walked across the street in front of my car. It wasn't running, but it wasn't going slow either. I suddenly realized it was no ordinary dog, but I knew it wasn't a bear either because it didn't have much of a belly. This was 3 to 4 times the size of a wolf, and so I can confirm it wasn't a wolf. What I saw looked like a humanoid, just hunched over on all fours, like with its back erect in the haunch, moving with pace across that road. The head was distinctly wolf-like and absolutely enormous. It looked like a giant wolf head. The being had jet black fur, as black as hair can get, and the legs were surprisingly lanky. My brain literally froze. Instantly, I began to try and rationalize it, but it was fairly impossible to rationalize what I'd just seen. The closest thing I compare it to would be a werewolf from the Harry Potter. You know, that thing that Professor Lupin turns into. All I can think of is, how did they know? That's nearly identical to what this thing looked like, as it was hunched over and walking on all fours. It was absolutely horrifying. It was literally quite accurate to looking like the exact CGI rendering. On all fours, its backside was probably 4.5 feet in height. The head was easily higher, much over 5 feet. Again, there was no way this was a bear or any other regular beast. There was nothing familiar about this thing. To anyone who might say, well, maybe it was just a really large dog that was sick and hunched. Definitely not. It was bigger than even the largest dog breeds I've ever heard of. To be over 4 feet in height at the back, while hunched over, that's definitely not a regular dog. Impossible to be a bear, as none are that skinny. The humanoid aspect of it couldn't be denied. You could just tell that if it wanted to, that it could have easily stood up on 2 legs. What's more insane is that, well, I could actually feel its energy. And that energy was dark, oppressive, and just a huge sense of danger. It had a very otherworldly energy about it. I slowly continued driving, and quickly stared over to the left side of the road as I was passing to try and see where it had gone. I was still able to see its silhouette by a bush, looking back at me, watching me pass. I didn't want to stop. I was terrified. So I went on with my mission to release the mouse, but I can tell you this. When I got home, I ran into my garage and I slammed that door as quick as possible. I was panicked and truly terrified. When you say that you know what you saw, they always say. I also didn't know my mind didn't just fill in the blanks or hallucinate this. Last night, I looked up accounts of dogmen, only to find that people's descriptions and drawings were fairly identical to what I had witnessed. What are the odds of that? Now I am 100% convinced that it's real. I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever see something like this. Signed, Rich. Dear Biker, back in late June of 2021, my sister and I were driving from Utah into Arizona. I was moving out to Phoenix at the time. I don't remember the exact forest area, but it was right as we started the descent from the mountains in northern Arizona. My sister and I were just having a conversation as she was driving. We entered into a clearing in the trees. As we came to the clearing, there was a big rock on the right side of the road that caught my eye. Upon seeing the rock, I saw the movement to the left of it. There was a very large and distinctly canine-shaped figure in the clearing next to that rock. As I stared at it, trying to make out what it was, we'd both gone silent mid-sentence. I clearly saw eyeshine that was almost a reddish-orange in hue. Whatever it was locked me in a stare and tracked the vehicle with its eyes. My blood ran cold and I felt a feeling of utter helplessness sink into me. The feeling was accompanied by the thought that whatever this was, it could do serious harm, and I would have no way of stopping it. The creature only stood there and stared at us as we passed. When the initial shock wore off a few seconds later, I quickly asked if my sister had seen anything. Her voice was very shaky as she confirmed exactly what I had seen. A very large, canine-like creature staring at us as we passed. Now, I've seen black bears up close and personal, and whatever this was, it was clearly not a black bear. It was quite a bit larger, with more of a slender build, and a very dog-like head and snout. My sister was very shaken up by the experience, and she had tears in her eyes due to the fear that she was feeling. She continued driving as we both felt completely unsafe to stop or even to have the window down. She still doesn't like to talk about it to this day. Now, I believe what we saw to be consistent to other reports that I've seen in the area, which I later researched after we got to Phoenix. I tell you, I'll never go into those woods alone. I hope that what we saw was just an optical illusion or a misidentified animal, but I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't, and I can still see it very clearly in my mind whenever I think about it. And when I do, I'm overcome with chills and I begin to shake all over again. Thanks for reading. Signed, Jessica. Dear TB, I was stationed at the Forward Observation Base in Comantia as a civilian contractor. Well, I was driving one morning from the FOB to Camp Monteith to do a distribution run and pick up laundry and such. Halfway there, you drive through a heavily wooded and hilly region, but not all that big and still somewhat populated. Hard for me to describe an exact location unless someone is actually familiar with that area. Well, about 2 miles before you pass a restaurant called The Planet, I witnessed a hairy hominid coming down a fairly steep slope and then crossing the road in front of the vehicle, going from my right side to my left. Now, this was nothing like what you hear from the American version of Bigfoot. I'm not sure what to call it exactly, so I'll just stick with a hairy hominid. This thing was only about 5 feet tall. Only an estimate, as I was in a 4-wheel drive that sits kinda high. It was slender, bipedal, with reddish-brown colored hair. heavily matted around the butt and front groin area. The hair was longer on the head than the rest of the body. The rest of the hair was about 4 inches in length. The profile of a flat face and was very dark-skinned. Hands were also black. I couldn't get a good look at the feet, and no gender-defining characteristics were visible. Now, the sighting didn't last too long, and there was also a shock factor involved. I'm just trying to be as detailed as I can. I only saw the profile of the face, but it was fairly flat and very dark. I could see the hands, but didn't get a real good look at the feet as it moved in front of the vehicle and then across the road and down a slope into a valley. The hands were also very dark. I would say black as far as the face and hands go. I was really curious after this happened, and I was afraid of ridicule from my workmates and feared for my security clearance, so I kept quiet about it. But after finally talking to my wife about it, I feel like I can share it with like-minded people. Does anyone out there know if hominids have a history of sightings in the Balkans or around Kosovo? I tried an internet search, but came up empty. I hope I was thorough enough and detailed enough. Thanks for reading. Signed, Rob. Bangles Church, Pennsylvania, October 15th. Last night, a party composed of 15 men and boys, all of them armed, set out on a quest for the strange animal that is alleged to have its lair in a cavern along the Swatara Creek. The net result of this expedition is that one member of the party claims that he got a glimpse of the mysterious monster and fired a shot at it, but missed. That is, he presumes that he failed to hit the beast, as he claims that it shook its head savagely before running away. Another member of the party verifies this story and says that the animal disappeared in Adam Bolt's meadow. This morning, another party, comprising of 20 men, visited the vicinity of the cave. While several were watching the place, a cry was heard, and the watchers turned and saw the creature bathing in the Swatara, a short distance south of where they were standing. Several shots were fired, but all were without effect. Members of the party described the creature as an animal weighing around 300 pounds, light sandy-colored. Mr. Malfair, a reputable citizen, asserts that he has seen the mysterious visitor running around in Mr. Rasp's meadow, which borders the Swatara. At one farm in the vicinity, the heads of 23 chickens have been found. Some lay the slaughter to the beast, and others say that it wouldn't take the bodies and just leave the heads. Others claim that they have watched the cave on the Swatara and have seen no animals in that vicinity, except for the chipmunks. Hey, Mr. Biker. This is a Bigfoot encounter, told to me by my grandfather. It happened in the early fall of 1938. He and his friends had done a backpacking trip to a small, remote lake near Mount St. Helens. They did this every year. One year, they even summited the volcano during their yearly camping trip. This particular time, there were 5 of them. The hike in took a couple of days back then. There weren't as many dirt roads built as there are now. They chose late summer and early fall when the berries were in season and the fish were usually biting well because they didn't want to pack much food. It helped lighten the load of their heavy backpacks. Now, my grandfather was a little over 20 years old during this backpacking trip, and after the 2-day hike out to the lake, they set up camp and decided the next morning that my grandfather and another guy would go try and catch some fish. The other 3 guys would go and collect berries, and the next morning they did just that. My grandfather walked to the far side of the lake, and his friend was on the side closest to the camp. Well, the fish were biting. He had caught a few when all of a sudden he started to feel uneasy, like he was being watched. The hair on the back of his neck seemed to stand on end, and then he got a whiff of a foul, rotting stench. He started to look around, and directly behind him, only 20 to 30 feet away, were 3 giant human-like creatures, covered in dark brown hair from head to toe, standing there at the tree line. My grandfather was a large man, around 6'4", but the smallest of these creatures was just as tall as he was. However, it was much wider at the shoulders and much thicker. According to what he was looking at, the next creature was a foot taller, and then the third was even a foot taller than that one, putting each of them at 6 feet or better. The next one was over 7 feet, and the other was over 8. He was overwhelmed with adrenaline from the fear and the panic. He wanted to run. However, these 3 giants staring at him were blocking the only direction that he could run. The only way he could have gotten away would be to leap into the lake and swim for it. He decided his best option was to calm down and just keep doing what he was doing. He cast in his line and began to fish again. Shortly after that, he caught another nice trout, and while reeling it in, it dawned on him that these creatures may be here for his fish. He unhooked the trout and tossed it over to them. The smallest of the 3 stepped away from the tree line and retrieved the fish and brought it back to the other 2. So he continued, tossing fish to them. The smaller of the 3 Bigfoot continued to retrieve each one. After a while, he landed a really nice 4th trout. He went to toss it back to them, but when he looked, they were gone. He then grabbed his equipment and ran around the lake in the direction of the other friend. After finding him, he said that they need to get the hell out of there, and began telling them what had happened as they were making their way back to camp. When they got there, the other friends were already there, packing up camp gear in a hurry. They said that they had ran across 3 giant hairy creatures while out berry hunting. Grandpa said that the group only took a day to hike back out downhill. They didn't know what they had encountered. They had never heard of anything like that in the 1930s, since the term Bigfoot hadn't been known. After that trip, they never went back to Mount St. Helens. They changed the location of their yearly trip, and my grandpa stated it wasn't until the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film was shown in theaters across the nation that he finally had a name for what he saw that day. Thanks for reading. Signed, Dean. And there it is. All the true reports of strange encounters and sightings that I have for you tonight. So what'd you think about these? As always, I'm anxious to read your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have an unexplained encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for taking this weird ride with me tonight. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and well, I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.